Welcome to Speak Out, Stand Out by Green Communications, where we're learning how to help our kids become better communicators. We believe our voices are the strongest asset we have, and our mission is to empower the next generation to use their voices to make a difference in the world around them. Whether you are a parent, an educator, or are just invested in today's youth, we hope this podcast will help you build confidence in our future, one voice at a time. Welcome back to Speak Out, Stand Out. I'm Elizabeth Green, and today's guest is Emilie Delworth. She is the founder of thepeacefulmother.com. The one thing that many mothers, I'd say all mothers strive to be, right, is peaceful, but it doesn't always come super easy and naturally, something we certainly have to work on. And that's what Emilie's here with us today to talk about. Emilie, thank you for being here. And why don't you just tell us really quickly, how did you become an advocate for being a peaceful mother?
Yes. Well, thank you so much for having me. So I have a very long background in early childhood education. I worked with children for basically from the time I was a teenager through my adulthood, and I always really valued peaceful parenting, which is basically a fancy name for authoritative parenting. And so when I became a mother, I knew my partner and I both agreed that this was the route that we wanted to take with our parenting. And then I brought my beautiful little girl into the world, and all of a sudden I realized just how difficult pulling that off actually was. I was faced with a lot of rage and really just couldn't understand what was wrong with me. I had no idea after all these years, nearly 2 decades of working with young children. Why am I so angry? Where is this coming from? Why am I such a monster? And so now I understand that, there was a lot of my childhood trauma coming to the surface. But ultimately what was going on is that I was just very chronically dysregulated. My nervous system was very just kind of primed for threat. And so every time my daughter cried, every time she had trouble latching, any little stressor that came up was just basically my stress bucket overflowing. And so it resulted in a lot of raging out. And I knew that was a problem. I knew that it was obviously hurting my relationship with my partner and definitely hurting my relationship with my daughter and my daughter's overall well-being. And so that led me into basically kind of discovering the wonders of somatic work. And so I got into somatic work and very quickly realized that it was helping me not only kind of manage my anxieties and different things that were coming up. Again, I did this all kind of, I had my daughter right before the pandemic broke out. And so as if I wasn't struggling enough, then we were faced with this wild situation with the pandemic. And so obviously anxiety is a huge, huge issue for me at that point. So I got into somatic work for that. And then, basically discovered wow, I'm triggered way less. And when I am triggered, I'm able to regulate more easily. I'm just less of a monster, and this whole peaceful parenting thing is coming so much more easily for me. And so I delved in. I was already, I had just gone back to school to study trauma recovery at that point. And I delved deep into learning all that I could about somatic work on top of that education. And so that is what got me into the work that I do now, helping other mothers, other caregivers, learn how to regulate their nervous system so that they can actually pull off peaceful or authoritative parenting, and really align their responses with what they value.
Yeah, I can totally relate with you. With everybody goes into parenting with this picture, this perfect picture, right, of what it's going to be and how we're going to be. And when we're in that, in the depths of it, especially in those newborn days and we're sleep deprived and all of that. But even when we have teenagers, right, it is a lot. It is a lot harder than we expected it would be. I also really like that you admit that you would rage out, because I can definitely relate with that and would feel like, man, I'm such a bad person because I lost my temper with my kid, and I'm being such a bad example to them. But what you're saying and what we're here to talk about today is that there's more to it than that, right? We're not bad people. Everybody has bad moments, right? When we react to things maybe in a way we shouldn't, but there's maybe more below the surface that we're not aware of that's causing that. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, of course, there are abusive, horrible people out there, but most of us are not that person. Most of us
Right.
absolutely love our children more than anything in the world. And our intention is to be the best possible parent that we can be for them. But we're imperfect humans. And, we have all of this past baggage that influences our nervous systems. And life is stressful. Things come up, there's financial concerns, there's pandemics, there's, all kinds of crazy things that go on in life. And so it's easy to get kind of thrown off. And so the more that we can connect with our bodies and really understand what's going on for ourselves, the better we are able to actually show up in the ways that we actually intend to. And then all of this transfers for our children as well. We
Right.
can teach this emotional regulation for our children and model that for them. And so then they go into adulthood with the tools that they need to better, better deal with life's stressors. It's a part of life. They're going to deal with adversity, and we want them to have the tools that they need so that they are, raging out less often. Of course, we're all human. We're going to have our moments, but, then they go into adulthood a lot more equipped than most of us,
Right.
were, have
So,
been.
right. And that's, of course, that's our goal, right? That is our goal, to raise productive and happy and communicative adults, right? So when you say emotional regulation, to me, that's like having the wherewithal to not lose your temper in a situation that's stressful. Is that all that emotional regulation is, or what is it?
Yeah. Well, and I want to clarify also, because I talk about nervous system regulation and then I talk about emotional regulation, and the two are different. They're separate, but they are related. And so I find that nervous system regulation is kind of the foundation for emotional regulation. Like if your nervous system is in like fight or flight mode, you're probably not going to be very successful at regulating your your
Okay.
emotions. So for emotional regulation, essentially, it doesn't mean that we're not having an emotion. It doesn't mean that we're not having some kind of response to the emotion. It's just that regulation essentially means that our response to kind of a situation at hand is appropriate given the situation. So,
Okay.
if my 2-year-old is running away from me in the morning because I'm trying to get her dressed and she's acting like 2-year-olds do, and she's running away and saying no and being silly, like it's not really appropriate. It's not an appropriate response for me to then like scream and throw things and freak out. That's not appropriate. It's appropriate for me to be frustrated for sure. But I want my emotional response to be in alignment so I can kind of say like, I'm getting really frustrated or, something like that, like, and use these different techniques to help myself get to this point where I can respond with intention.
Okay. But you said that's a lot harder if our nervous system is out of whack. So let's maybe then back up and talk about that. How do we know if our nervous system is out of whack? I mean, I think, most people relate to having anxiety. And, a lot of people, take anxiety medication. Is that a sign that it's something with our nervous system? Is that what you tell me? How do we know if our nervous system's out of whack?
Right. Well, I would say yes. If you are someone who is struggling with anxiety, then yes, your nervous system is in some kind of chronic stress state. But not everybody with, who's dysregulated is dealing with anxiety. And the thing is everybody gets dysregulated at some point. That's just part of life. And so ultimately, what is going on is that our nervous system is having basically a stress response to a stressor. And so that means that we are kind of put into some kind of fight, flight, freeze, fawn mode. And so it can be really difficult for people in society to recognize this because we are so disconnected from our bodies, which is not necessarily natural. Like as babies, we come into the world totally connected to our bodies, but we're kind of inadvertently taught to disconnect, throughout our childhood and our lives. And so it can be really difficult. But the first step is really learning how to start connecting with that body and just really bringing awareness to the different sensations that you're having. And so whether I'm teaching children or whether I'm teaching adults, the number one thing is really trying to start identifying the body sensations that correlate with the emotions that we're having, or when we find ourselves in stressful situations, really trying to tap in and recognize like, okay, I feel heat in my face right now, or I recognize that I'm clenching my fists, or like I'm feeling tension in my back. My heart is beating really fast. And for kids, it's like, do your arms feel like cooked spaghetti or raw spaghetti? And does it feel like there's a drum in your chest? And so really starting to identify these body sensations, because those are the signs. Those are the signs that our body is telling us like, hey, something's going on. And the more that we can recognize that, the more we can catch ourselves before we go from like, okay, I'm fine, to like raging out at our kid, And so
Gotcha.
Or, at the person who cut us off in traffic, or our boss, or whoever it is in life.
Yes. So is the dysregulation, is that moment when we're feeling, like you said, our heart's pounding or we're clenching our fists, or is it a constant state that we're in?
No, not necessarily, because we can find a regulated state for our nervous system. And that's the work that I do, is helping people learn how to not just in the heat of the moment, but the really important thing is every day, like at least for a couple minutes a day. Before I came on this podcast with you, I took a few moments and I made sure I wasn't feeling nervous. I wasn't feeling overwhelmed, like nothing was going on, but I wanted to make sure that I'm coming into this regulated. And so I did some work to regulate my nervous system. And so the more that we can use these different somatic and neurosomatic techniques to regulate the nervous system, then we're going to go through life and okay, now, suddenly I'm late for something. That's going to dysregulate me a little bit. But if I'm going into it more regulated, I can handle that stress more. And so I like to kind of talk about, like, we all have this stress bucket, and so the more that we can practice these techniques to help us kind of empty out the bucket, then we're going through our day and our teenager slams the door and screams at us. A little bit of stress goes into our bucket, and then somebody cuts us off in traffic, a little bit more. And then our partner comes home and tells us that they lost their job. Like, okay, we just got a big full bucket. And so, we don't want it to overflow. We want to be able to then recognize, okay, it's time for me to use some of these techniques and regulate my nervous system so that I'm emptying out that bucket and I can handle the next stressor that life's going to bring.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. And I love the visual of being able to picture the bucket. I can see it filling as you're saying that. So what are some of these techniques that we can use and teach our children too?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, some of my kind of go-to that, and I practice all of this, not all of it, but a lot of it I practice with my daughter. I started when she was 2 years old. And she absolutely loves it. So this is all stuff that you can teach your children and do with your children. This isn't something you need like to take a ton of time out of your busy day to do. And your children might not necessarily do them correctly. That's okay. The point is to just model that for them, give your space the time to do it, and have fun with it. Use it as a way to connect with your children. So some of them are, kind of breathing techniques. So one of my favorite is just, you take a breath in through your nose, and then when we breathe out, we're going to breathe out as if we are breathing through a straw. Like we're stuck, we have a straw in our mouth. And so our mouth is going to be like this. For those who are watching, basically a little O. And so we breathe in. And so I emptied out my full breath as if I was emptying it out through a straw. And so that's kind of like this very high payoff drill. Most people do really well with something like that. And then one of my favorites also is just shaking. I just love, this is a really good one, especially when we're angry, or when something really stressful just happened. Like a week ago, my daughter had a scary situation in the swimming pool, like very, jumped into the pool, like when I wasn't watching, and I had to jump in and get her. And it was very, very stressful. And after we were all, everybody's safe and my daughter's okay and calm and all of the things, I stepped away and I shook it. I just shook it out. I'm like, okay,
yeah,
got to shake it out. And so this is a fun one for kids, as well as adults, to shake it out. And the important thing to recognize is that some of these techniques are going to be up-regulating, and some of them are going to be down-regulating. So something like the straw breath is actually that one's a little more neutral, whereas the shaking is something that's very it can be up-regulating. And so you don't,
and
so
let
you
me
kind
just,
of want to,
what do you mean by up-regulating?
Yeah. So there's times where, so basically, like if we're in fight or flight, that's where our system is in hyper arousal. So this is going to look like we're feeling rushed, speedy, angry. We are anxious, having trouble sleeping, things like that. Whereas hypo arousal is more when we are in the freeze or fawn state. And that's going to look more like lethargic, unmotivated, just tired all the time, maybe even constipated, things like that. And so we can kind of, again, use these signs that our body's giving us, to let us know, like, okay, I need something up-regulating versus down-regulating. So for example, with nostril breathing, like if I'm going into my day and I'm just like really tired or feeling really unmotivated, you can do a nostril breath where you just block off one side of your nostril. So for something that's going to be up-regulating, you will block off your left nostril, and you're just simply going to breathe through your right nostril.
And it matters which one? It does matter, like block off the left? Okay.
Yes. So left is, when you block off the left, that is going to be upregulating. That's going to give you energy and kind of bring you out of this like down state. And
I need the
opposite, right? Most of us do. And then most of us, yeah. And then if you find yourself just kind of anxious or speedy, like a lot of us are like, we gotta go, and we're just like, ah, and we're like in a hurry, and we're like, we don't know why. There's a country song, I'm in a hurry to get things done. I rush until life's no fun. Like that's so many of us. And so in that case, you block off your right nostril and you breathe through your left, a few breaths, and that can help bring you down. And so, I could literally go on for like 2 hours telling you lots of different techniques, but I feel like there's a few for some people to try.
That alone is very helpful. And it seems so simple. So, but we just do it for like a minute or so, and then we should feel the difference from this already?
Yeah. Sometimes you can feel the difference. For those who are really disconnected from their bodies, I find it really helpful to test the nervous system. So this is going to look like, and again, there's lots of different ways that you can do this, but I'll just share one. So you're basically, before you do any of the techniques, you establish a baseline by just simply turning your head from one side. And you're going to take a mental note of what you're looking at the point in front of you. And then you're going to turn your head the other direction as far as you can go. And you're going to take a mental note of what you're looking at. And then you go back to neutral, you do your technique. So maybe I'm going to do a straw breath. And now I'm going to test the nervous system to see how I responded. So I'm going to turn again to both sides. And I'm looking at, did I rotate further? Did I rotate about the same or not as far? So in my case, I rotated further, which means that my nervous system is responding well to the straw breath. If
Okay,
I
so we turn
had,
our head as far as we can each time, and then we're
yeah, as
looking
far
like
as you
straight ahead
can.
as far what we can see straight ahead with the turn.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, okay,
Yeah.
I got it.
Yeah. And so that just kind of helps for those who aren't super connected to the body. That can really help us. And whether we are connected or not, it's just super helpful to know, because if you're rotating further, then your nervous system's responding well. It's more regulated. If it's about the same, then you're having a neutral response. So maybe you need to do more straw breaths, or maybe you need a different technique. And then if you're not rotating as far, that's a negative response. Your nervous system is not liking that. You just kind of further dysregulated yourself. And so you want to end on, a technique that you kind of know is something that you always respond well to. So for me, it is the straw breath. I
Mhm.
always respond well to that. So it's important to have kind of a toolbox of all these different techniques, so that then we can always kind of test and see, one day shaking is going to work really well for me and the next day it's not. Or one
Mhm.
moment it's going to work really well and the next it's not. And so we want to be able to kind of test, get that communication from our nervous system, and always end on a positive note, so that we are ending our practice on a more regulated note.
Okay. So all of this kind of builds up to back to like bringing, these communication skills to our kids that we started talking about with emotional regulation. You're saying
Mm-hmm.
it really starts with this, right? Regulating our nervous system. And these are skills that, and things and ideas that we should be teaching our children from the get go, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. I
Okay.
mean, for a very young child, around the age of one, young toddlers, sometimes depending on the child, even they're still infants. My daughter was 11 months old when she started screaming no and hitting me, and really kind of expressing emotion outside of just kind of crying for her basic needs. So, when they're young, it just starts with naming their emotions. I can
Okay.
see that you're frustrated. I can see that you feel disappointed, or it seems like you're feeling sad about this, and naming our own too. Like, oh, I'm feeling really frustrated right now because I spilled the spaghetti all over the floor, and just kind of naming that. And that's kind of the first step. And so then as they get older, you can begin, and you're modeling it for them. You're showing them like, okay, this is what I do when I'm frustrated that I just spilled spaghetti all over the floor. Maybe I'm going to take some deep breaths, or maybe I'm going to, massage my vagus nerve here on my neck, or I'm going to do something to regulate myself. And so that's just something that they're seeing you do. And then as they move through toddlerhood, they're in their preschool age, then you're kind of getting them more involved, and you're having it turns into this playful thing. They're now more able to verbalize their own emotions. I also highly recommend having visuals so that they can show you. I sell these. I created a emotional regulation poster series so that kids can go and actually point to it, especially if they're nonverbal children. That's really
Mm, yeah.
valuable. And yeah, and then as they move through, their developmental stages, they eventually will get to a point where they can use these techniques on their own. I have clients, my daughter does it. I have clients as well who, their 4-year olds, are their 4 and 5-year olds are like, have this big emotional reaction, catch themselves, understand what's going on for themselves. They're able to recognize what's going on in their body, and they're able to step away and use techniques to calm themselves down. Sometimes it's just letting themselves cry or scream or whatever it is.
Hmm.
But then they use these techniques, and then they come back and they're able to say, oh, man, I was feeling really upset that I fell off my bike. I was so mad that I fell off my bike. And so I needed to take a moment to get my emotion out. And now I feel more regulated. And so these are 4 and 5-year-old children, that are
Wow.
able to do this practice and actually verbalize what's going on for them, and all of that. And so, yeah, I mean, they're going to obviously move through life at an advantage that most of us did not have.
Right. I love the example that you just gave. You just made me immediately think of one of my own children, because when he is frustrated about something, he's a pretty quiet kid. And when he is frustrated about something, he walks off and wants to be alone for a few minutes. And he's done this for as long as I can remember. And I would oftentimes, I mean, I always do. I try to get him to tell me what's wrong, especially if I didn't see. Like if I saw him fall off his bike, I know he's mad that happened. But otherwise, I'm trying to get him to talk to me. And that's not always helping the situation, right? We want them to communicate with us, but sometimes they just need a minute, just like we do as adults,
Yeah.
right? So what he's literally doing is regulating his nervous system and emotions, right?
Yes.
And on his own, like, and that's what we want. Whereas I feel like he should be telling me what's wrong so I can fix it, which is not necessarily
Right.
the case.
Yes. I mean, it's so natural for us as parents to want to fix our kids' challenging emotions.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to let them feel the emotion fully so that they do learn that emotions are fleeting, that they come and then they go. And so that they learn that you can release this from the body instead of holding it inside of you and having it haunt you for your whole life. And yeah, I mean, a lot of times it's, we're either trying to come up with solutions right away, or we're like, tell me what's wrong. And they're
Yeah.
so dysregulated. They can't even verbalize what's going on for them. Like, just like us, like when we're so in, in the midst of dysregulation of some big emotional reaction, like our logical brain is not online. Like they're not going to like even hear or process what you're saying, whether you're giving solutions or trying to find out what happened. Like you have to just allow for that emotion. And it's uncomfortable
Yes.
for us. I think largely because we weren't raised and we don't live in a society where like that's accepted and that's okay. Like it was very much like, I think most of us, it's like, stop crying,
Yeah.
or, what's wrong, and so there's these very kind of innocent yet influential messages sent to us that like these emotions are unsafe or they're not acceptable, or things like that. So
Right.
it can be hard for parents to allow for that. But yeah, and I also
Yeah.
want to mention too that because I have so many parents of young children come to me and they're like, how do I get my kid to stop fighting or stop screaming or this or that? And it's so important to recognize that these behaviors are their innate attempt at regulating their nervous system. The crying, the screaming, the hitting, the stomping, all of those things, those are their attempts at regulating their nervous system. Now, of course, some of them are not safe. Some of them are not going
Right.
to be acceptable as they move through life and get older. But that's why it's so important to recognize this, because it's like, okay, this is kind of their natural inclination. Like for me, my natural inclination, my default when I'm angry, if I'm not able to regulate through it, is to yell. And so
Mm-hmm.
for a child, if you can recognize, okay, their natural thing is to hit, we can use these behaviors as a cue, like as like, okay, these are the types of techniques I need to use. So for me as a yeller, maybe sound release, or doing tongues, moving my tongue around in my mouth, or just doing something relating to my mouth and my throat is going to be helpful instead of yelling. For the child who's hitting, maybe it's going to be helpful to have them stomp their feet or rub their hands together or push their hands against your hands, or push against the wall, something using those, same body parts and kind of getting the energy out in a similar way.
Yeah, those are great tips, and it's all like clicking in my brain. So I love it. So one final question for you. I think that a lot of people listening might be thinking, "Man, this would have been great to know whenever my kids were babies, and now they're tweens and teens. How can I start this now with older kids? How can I start teaching them these things today if they're not the toddlers, they're not the preschoolers. They're already set in their ways and they have their go-to whenever they're angry, whether it's to yell or hit or whatever. How can we do that today with our older kids?
Yeah. I think for one, it comes down to having some very candid conversations about like, hey, these are things that I'm just learning. And I'm sorry I didn't know it sooner, but this is something I'm learning and I'm finding it so helpful. And I really think that it would help you too. And, are you open to kind of learning this with me? And then also, regardless of how old we are, we still, all humans learn best through what is modeled for them. So the more that you are actively doing this work and you're a teenager or your tween or your 8-year-old, whatever, sees that you are doing this, and then it's affecting how you show up in the challenging situations, they're like, oh my gosh, I like slammed the door in my mom's face and she didn't immediately scream at me and bang on the door like she normally does. Like instead, like she did this other thing or whatever the situation is, they're like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, that's interesting. So yeah, I think it's a lot of modeling, and then it's having a conversation and being very candid about these things, and just expressing like, it's my job to prepare you for life, and it's okay that you're having all of these emotions, but I didn't know how to model the most ideal, kind of ways of dealing with these things. And I'd really love it if I could do that for you now. You're still allowed to feel angry at me. You're still allowed to feel sad. You're still allowed to feel all the things. But maybe we can work together on these new ways of expressing it.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of teenagers are going to be receptive to that because they want that connection with you.
Right.
Regardless of how much headbutting is going on and not talking to you and things like that. Like they want that connection so much, and they want that guidance.
Yeah. And for the moms out there or dads listening that feel guilty, I know that, I think we all feel guilty about things that we've done as parents and ways that we've not shown up for our kids or failed in certain ways. Today's a new day, right? So even if you yelled at your kid because they didn't get up in time for school today and they were late and you had a rough morning, right? We can start implementing some of these things today. It doesn't matter what we did yesterday. It doesn't matter what we did in the past. Every day we're learning, and we can show new behavior that you're saying they're going to notice. They're going to take notice of, and it's going to make a difference.
Absolutely. And the other really exciting thing is that like humans are designed for our nervous systems to mirror each other's. And particularly for our children, their nervous systems are being built when they're young in response to our own. And so, yes, once our kids are a little bit older and we're like, oh my God, I totally sucked at all this stuff. I totally failed. Oh my God, I'm horrible. Look what I've done to my poor kid. We have all this guilt and we have all this shame. But the beautiful thing is that your child can still, their nervous system is still going to mirror yours. That's the beauty of co-regulation. I mean, we co-regulate with our dog and our cat and our partner and our friend. Like, of course, our children, our teens are still going to be affected by our ability to stay regulated in escalated situations. So if they are at 100, they are so escalated and we're able to regulate through it, their nervous system is going to mirror ours. And it might not be immediate, but it's happening. And that makes a difference. And over time, that impacts how their nervous system responds to stressors. And they learn through that. So there's so much built into us and into how we connect. And then that's not even mentioning the attachment bond. It is never too late to strengthen our child's attachment to us, even as teenagers. And we can repair. That's the beautiful thing is like, and really we don't want to be perfect, because that wouldn't set our children up for success in life if we were just like perfect, or if we were seemingly perfect. Like adversity is a part of life. Humans are imperfect. And so when we do mess up, it's really valuable to be able to say like, hey, I'm really sorry. You didn't deserve to be talked like that. This is my problem. Like I should have done this, or I was feeling this way. And, what basically now, like, how can I connect with you? How can I make this up to you? How can I make this right? And those are really, really influential moments, and they can bring us closer to our children.
Yeah. I love it. Well, Emilie, thank you. I think this has been very, very valuable, and things that I know I'm personally going to start doing today. I'm going to start doing your breathing techniques daily. Nice. I can already see how that would benefit me. So if you are interested in learning more about Emilie and what she has to offer, she has some great freebies on her website, thepeacefulmother.com. She also does coaching. You can find her on social media. We'll, of course, link to all of those things below. But Emilie, you have like one-on-one coaching. You do. Tell us quickly about what you do offer if somebody's interested in learning more. And you mentioned a while back about having lots of tools in her toolkit. How can people learn more of those from you?
Absolutely. Yes. So I do offer one-on-one coaching for a little bit longer. I'm going to be phasing out within the next 6 months or so, because I'll be releasing my group coaching program, teaching mothers how to regulate their nervous systems and emotions. I also have a book, The Angry Mom's Guide to Self-Regulation. You can find it on Amazon. And that walks readers through the entire process of learning how to regulate their nervous systems and emotions. And so there's a ton of techniques in there that you can try. I also share some free techniques on my website. Like you said, I have some free guides as well. I also offer, I have some digital downloads. So we've got emotional regulation posters for kids, as well as teens and adults. And that just provides a visual as well as a bunch of different techniques that you can try also. And yeah, I've got some courses that that are in the works. And then, yes, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm on YouTube, and I share lots of information and techniques there as well.
Yes, lots of valuable things. That's where we first connected already. So at the very least, follow her on socials, but definitely check out her website as well. So Emilie, thank you so much for your time today and your insight. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
If you are looking for more ways to build communication skills in your kids, grab our free mini lesson on how to craft a polished and professional speech out of thin air, along with 52 fun prompts so your kids can practice every single week. You can find that along with info about our upcoming public speaking and debate courses for kids at greencommunicationsedu.com.